The reform that solved one problem and created 10 more. At first, it felt like relief. A long-standing issue was finally addressed, a solution put into motion and progress declared. No one expected the cure to become more complicated than the disease. This story matters today because reforms are often judged by what they fix immediately, not by what they quietly disrupt over time. Solutions designed for urgency can reshape systems in ways no one fully predicts. The pressure to act decisively in the face of a visible problem creates a natural bias toward solutions that address the most apparent symptom rather than the underlying system. The result is often a reform that succeeds on its own terms while generating consequences that exceed the scope of the original problem. At the moment the reform was introduced, pressure was intense, public frustration was high, and leaders needed visible action. The problem was clear, measurable, and politically costly to ignore. The clarity of the problem made it particularly susceptible to a narrow solution. When a problem is well-defined, the temptation is to design a solution of equal specificity. But well-defined problems rarely exist in isolation. They are embedded in systems where every element is connected to others, and changing one element necessarily affects those connections. The proposal promised efficiency, fairness, and modernization, offering a streamlined approach that replaced outdated structures. Support came quickly, driven by optimism and exhaustion rather than deep scrutiny. The speed of adoption reflected the depth of frustration. People who had waited years for action were predisposed to welcome any action, and the emotional momentum of relief overwhelmed the slower process of evaluation. Initial results looked promising. The original issue diminished, statistics improved, and officials pointed to success as proof the system worked. The early metrics confirmed the reform's effectiveness within its intended scope. The problem it was designed to solve was demonstrably reduced. This success created a narrative of vindication that insulated the reform from the scrutiny that might have detected its unintended consequences earlier. What remained hidden were the secondary effects, subtle shifts in incentives, responsibility, and behavior that began spreading beyond the reform's original scope. The secondary effects were not defects in the reform. They were natural consequences of intervening in a complex system. Every change to a system structure alters the incentives that guide behavior within it, and altered incentives produce altered behavior, which in turn produces outcomes that the original reform did not anticipate. Departments adjusted, rules evolved, and priorities shifted to accommodate the new framework. The institutional adaptation to the reform was rapid and thorough. Organizations that operated within the reform system restructured their workflows, reallocated their resources, and redefined their objectives to align with the new requirements. Each of these adjustments was individually logical, but collectively transformative. The problem had been solved, but the system around it was beginning to change in ways no one had planned. As the reform settled into place, its unintended consequences began appearing at the edges, where the new rules interacted with systems they were never designed to replace. Fixing one bottleneck created pressure elsewhere, shifting strain rather than eliminating it. As responsibility moved faster than capacity, the hydraulic metaphor is apartment pressure in a system does not disappear when a bottleneck is removed. It redistributes. The reform had eliminated one point of restriction, but the energy that had been contained by that restriction now flowed into adjacent areas that were not equipped to handle it. Institutions adapted unevenly, optimizing for new metrics, while neglecting areas no longer measured or rewarded. The selection of metrics is one of the most powerful and least scrutinized aspects of any reform. What is measured receives attention. What is not measured is neglected. By changing the metrics of success, the reform effectively redefined what institutions cared about, and the areas that fell outside the new metrics lost resources, attention, and quality. What looked efficient on paper became complex in practice. As layers of workaround replaced the simplicity the reform promised. The gap between theoretical simplicity and practical complexity is a recurring feature of reform. Systems that appear streamlined in design become complicated in execution because they must interact with the full complexity of the environments they operate within. Each interaction that the original design did not anticipate requires a workaround, and workarounds accumulate until a reform system is more complex than the one it replaced. Citizens notice inconsistencies, benefits in some areas paired with new obstacles in others, creating confusion instead of clarity. The public experience of the reform was fragmented. Different populations encountered different effects depending on their position within the system. Some experienced genuine improvement. Others experienced new burdens. The absence of a unified experience made it difficult to form a coherent public assessment of the reform's overall impact. Leaders defended the outcome by pointing to the original success, reluctant to admit that the solution had introduced new fragilities. The defense was structurally reinforced by the metrics of success. As long as the reform was evaluated by its original objective, it appeared successful. Only when the evaluation expanded to include the secondary effects did the full picture emerge. Each adjustment meant to fix a side effect produced another downstream consequence. The pattern of cascading adjustment is characteristic of reforms in complex systems. Each correction addresses a specific problem, but alters the conditions that other parts of the system depend on, generating new problems that require their own corrections. The system was still functioning, but it was becoming harder to understand and harder to manage. The reform had solved the problem it was built for, but it had quietly multiplied the problems it never anticipated. The conflict emerged when the growing web of side effects began colliding, exposing how tightly the reform had reshaped the entire system. What once felt like isolated complications turned systemic, as failures in one area triggered breakdowns in others. The interconnection of consequences that had been individually manageable became collectively overwhelming when multiple secondary effects reinforced each other simultaneously. Public frustration intensified because the original problem was gone, yet daily life felt harder, more bureaucratic, and less predictable. The paradox of successful reform producing worse outcomes was difficult for the public to process. The logical expectation was that solving a major problem should improve conditions overall. The reality that solving one problem could worsen the broader situation contradicted intuition and eroded trust. Institutions struggled to correct course, because undoing the reform risked reopening the original issue it had successfully resolved. The dilemma was genuine. The reform had achieved its primary objective. Reversing it would reintroduce the problem that had motivated it, which remained politically unacceptable, but maintaining it perpetuated the secondary effects that were now causing harm. Leaders face a dilemma: defend a solution that no longer worked as promised, or admit that success had come with hidden costs. The political economy of admission was unfavorable. Leaders who acknowledged the reform's secondary effects would be held responsible for them. Leaders who maintained the narrative of success could defer accountability until the consequences became undeniable. The buildup reached its peak when a major stress test revealed how fragile the system had become under the weight of constant patching. What was designed as simplification now demanded continuous intervention. The reform had not failed outright. It had succeeded too narrowly, and that narrow success was destabilizing everything around it. The climax arrived when it became clear that the reform's greatest achievement was also its greatest limitation. By focusing narrowly on one problem, it had ignored the system it lived within. The resolution lies in recognizing that lasting solutions must account for complexity, not just urgency. Fixing one issue without considering connections often creates more harm than progress. This story matters today because reform remains one of the most powerful tools of change, but also one of the most dangerous when applied without systemic thinking. History shows that success measured too quickly can hide long-term cost. The lesson is not to avoid reform, but to design it with humility and foresight. Problems rarely exist in isolation. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. The